Evening everyone, welcome back then to another LFM stream here for round number 5 of the Case King Pro Series here in Season 10, and we are at the wonderful Mount Panorama circuit. Yes, we are back at Bathurst, and if the last couple of seasons of the Pro Series has told us anything, that is that this circuit always gives us drama, it gives us action, and it gives us everything that we could possibly want from an evening's worth of racing. And I'll tell you what, some extra things to really shake up the mix potentially going into tonight's race is that I know that today 1.9.2, the second hotfix we've had to the game in the aftermath of the release of 1.9, and I think there was a little bit of BOP changes, and also apparently something that may have affected the way in which the tyres are currently wearing at the moment with negative toe. Now, of course, pre-1.9, when we were in 1.8 of the game, negative toe was the meta. It was a case of negative toe everywhere, and then you get that extra rotation, you get that extra agility in the corners as well, and you didn't really pay much of a price for it. 1.9, we started to get some sort of introduction of those penalties in the way in which it distorts the tyre when we've got those negative toe, particularly on the rear tyres, and then that had adverse impact on the temperature, and then in the lateral kind of distortion in the temperature difference to outside and inside, and then the way in which that would play out in the tyre wear model. And from what I understand, there may have been some potential tweaks in terms of that, as well as some BOP changes. I think there was a significant change maybe at Monza, which was not too surprising. I know that when we had a recent race there, I think in SRO, that it was Mercedes dominance all the way. It was a car that admittedly we would kind of anticipate to be quick, but it was a bit ridiculously quick for that. So it's great to see that Kunos have been sort of really hot on it and trying to get each of these little fixes and tweaks along the way to we can really maximize all of the glory that we have going on with this game, and also really benefit from all of those fantastic changes that everyone has been really enjoying in 1.9. So there are some of the things on the latest news of today. But what did we have last week in the Pro Series? Well, we were at Spa-Francorchamps, and it was a fantastic and very busy race that we had there indeed. Tricky to manage, and especially heading into it with these new cars, it was a little bit unsure as to how it was going to play out. But in the end, it was Ferrari dominance at the front of the field, and returning to the LFM platform and the Pro Series Championship, Trevor Wenham took a stellar victory, just about ahead of Hugo Merles and Jack Alexander, that were pushing the British driver all the way to the very end. And also Samir Fock made it a Ferrari quad taking of the top points in the grid, finishing in a fantastic P4. So whilst Ferraris may have been the fastest cars at Spa, it may be a different story today. We know traditionally the Mercedes has been an absolute weapon around here. The BMWs are pretty handy here too. Teemu Karppinen had some really strong pace here last season in the M4. And of course, with the 296, the new Lamborghini, the 992 Porsche, it's going to be a really interesting balance of how this plays out. The Porsche has always been amazing in the agility aspects and those very difficult braking zones and the sort of the wiggly nature that we have over the top of the mountain, but it just lost out so much in terms of straight line performance. The 992, it's not that much of a slouch anymore. Maybe straight line speed still isn't its number one go-to characteristic, but it's a lot more manageable than it once was. So the Porsche could be a serious contender around here and today, and depending on what we have in terms of weather conditions as well, and how these tyre wear changes may be impacting some of these cars, could seriously be something for these drivers to consider, and will be really interesting to see how it plays into effect with each of the different manufacturers that we have on the grid this evening. So taking a little bit of a closer look at the championship race for tonight, Bathurst race circuit, 23 turns of trials and tribulations that will be looking to bite you at any moment through Hell Corner, menacing enough as is, before approaching the mountain for for the first time up to Griffin's Bend at turn 2, making your way through up into the cutting, very tricky, windy section of the lap through there, and then you head over in towards the likes of Skyline before heading down into this very tricky dipper section and trying to nail all of those apexes. Work your way through Forest Elbow, trying to maximize the exit out of turn 18 because you carry all of that momentum down the hill, down the Conrod Straight, and then in towards the chase, which is one of the main overtaking opportunities you'll see in the racing tonight, because there's not too many when you're in the middle of the mountain. Tricky braking zone into 21, and also on the power out of that corner of 22 can be a bit tricky with the grass on the outside and trying to stay out of that, and then through into Murray's Corner to round out the lap. So it is a very difficult circuit indeed, and really is going to be pushing our drivers to their limit. I don't know if we have a Mr. George Boothby in the server for this evening, because unfortunately George was rather injured from last week's race, as Grantus Correcas had a little bit of a blank moment behind the wheel, unfortunately, his teammate, and unfortunately drove into the back of George Boothby, and in the process his direct drive wheel, which is very, very high in terms of force feedback, that unfortunately as a result he ended up I think fracturing or getting a I don't know if it was a fracture in his finger, or he certainly caused himself quite a bit of an injury in that. And yeah, it goes to show that whilst, sim racing, obviously, generally speaking, a lot safer than real motorsport for the most part, that there are still definitely some possibilities to be injured when you do have those high-powered wheels. So, to any of our drivers for this evening, and to those of you that may be sim racing enthusiasts yourself at home, yes, do be aware of the power that those wheels can have, because they can really be quite dramatic when they are sent into a bit of disarray. So we will be getting underway with the final bits of practice in just a moment, once the server has opened up, and then we can have a little bit of a look at what our drivers are getting up to in these final closing stages before they head into qualifying. And dislocation, thank you for clarification on that front. I couldn't think of the word. I knew it wasn't quite a break. And yes, it was great to see George back up to speed. He was leading that race for a very long time. I think a little bit of traffic in the pit stop phase ended up seeing him drop behind and finishing P2, I do believe, in the end. But great to see him back behind the wheel. Don't think we have him for this evening. I know he is still recovering from that injury as well, but certainly has not stopped one of the winningest drivers in the Pro Series Championship from showing just how much speed he has as always. And the green lights will be away after, so we'll have a 50-minute qualifying session that should be underway in just a few moments, and then we will have lights out at about, I think, 25 past 7 UK time, so that'll be 25 past 8 Central European time, I do believe, if I've got my time zones correctly. So just waiting for the server to pop up and go, which it has just done, so we shall start to have a look and see how our drivers are getting on for this evening's prep before they head into that qualifying session, because you see two different approaches for the most part. You'll see drivers really trying to finalize their qualifying setups, and then you'll also see drivers really trying to optimize the side of things in terms of the race pace. Sorry, I'm just trying to fix some aspects of inside the game because I have no game sound, which is rather exciting, but I do believe that is all sorted, so when we switch over in a moment, all should be well. But yeah, you do really tend to see those different final approaches before you head into that session. Do you try to get everything possible for qualifying, or do you sacrifice maybe just a little bit in order to then get that better management of your tyres and all of those other aspects as well? And myself, I tend to usually sort of go for race pace more than anything, but when you're at a circuit like Bathurst, there is that extra importance on-track position, because so easily someone can have an issue over the top of the mountain and you can just be an innocent bystander, and very quickly things can very much start to get tricky in the midfield. So it is a decision the drivers really have to consider maybe a bit more seriously than they otherwise would for other tracks that we head to. So I do believe everything is now up and running for us to have a look at how our drivers are getting on in the closing stages of this practice session. So 5.5 minutes or so left on the clock. Got Angel in Astroza in that Yas Heats Esports Porsche number 21 car. Very nice livery on that. Just as a little bit of an update for some of you that may not have seen the last couple of races, but have seen some of the Pro Series action before. Unfortunately, some of the custom cameras that we have for the starting grid aren't working at the moment since 1.9 came out. So we will have a little bit of a compromised build-up to the beginning of the race, but when we get into the main action, we will have everything that we could possibly want from these drivers this evening. Inestrosa starting to try and make one of his final bids to the top, and it does on a 201.882. So good pace so far demonstrated from the Porsche driver. I know that pre 1.9, 159s in particular conditions were possible. I think the track temperature and the ambient temperature, it's the main factor in this, alongside with the fact that as of right now we have a fast track surface rather than optimal, likely means that 59s might be a little bit out of reach, and cars for the most part have got slower in the 1.9 update. I think Monza might be the only exception due to the fact that there is so much straight line speed action around the Italian circuit, and as a result, with the changes in terms of rolling resistance and all of those factors, that the cars have ended up gaining quite a chunk of straight line speed, and consequently are a bit more rapid around that. But I think for this wonderful Australian masterpiece of a circuit, that we will probably be a little bit lacking in terms of pace from previous seasons, but still all of the action for these guys will still be just as thick and fast as it always has been. And yes, so there are 2 drop rounds for this championship, so and it usually is quite a big factor in terms of how it can then end up affecting the overall points result. At this point in the season, generally speaking, unless there have been drivers that have either had some no-shows or have had some particular disasters, that for the most part, these drivers are building up their kind of overall bank of points total. But yes, when we get to those pointier ends of the season, those drop scores become ever more pivotal, and there has been championships that have been very much affected by the outcome of those drop scores. And so the likes perhaps of Buffby, who it looks like isn't featuring in the field this evening, may very much be looking to make use of that system. Neil Steinbrenner for the M4 at the moment has cleared in Astroza's lap almost 0.6 of a second, and so said the M4 could be rather pacey, although I have just seen his purple sectors, I think, may have been going the way of this man, almost taking the provisional top time in the practice session. Aidan Walsingham switching over from the Mercedes to the Ferrari for this season. Has been showing some pretty good pace in this car already. And let's see if we can catch it on board in the closing stages of this practice session before we head into qualifying. Nico Pennanen just rounding out a lap. Trying to see who have we got. Someone, I'll tell you what, that's a man to go on board with. Nicholas Huben in the number 6 Unicorns of Love Mercedes. Mr. Consistency so far this season, and has been absolutely stellar. Currently sits at the top of the championship standings ahead of Grantas Correcas, who has taken 2 victories this season, but a rather costly drive-through penalty at Suzuka has impacted that overall points tally. And as of right now, it is this number 6 car that is topping the standings. And I'll tell you what, he is probably going to be very much in the hunt for victory this evening. He's an absolute weapon behind the wheel of this Mercedes, and this car is a master of this circuit. It always has been. I'm sure maybe little tweaks may have affected it somewhat, but the Mercedes, if anything, is one of the cars that has really benefited from the 1.9 update. And whilst it's not quite the absolute mental powerhouse that it was at this circuit a few generations ago, it is definitely still a platform that works extremely well around this track. Just a lot of stability, grunt from that V8 under the bonnet in the front of the in the front of the car. You know, that being where the bonnet is, and also the electronics as well, very sophisticated in this car to, you know, really deal with the undulation in some of those tricky braking zones and also traction areas as well. So a good package overall, and the way that the aero package has kind of changed in terms of how it's been modelled within ACC as well. It just performs in terms of general cornering capabilities a lot more strongly than it used to. So definitely this man will be one to watch. He's got one of the BMWs just in front of him. I think that might be Nico Penman in the number 28 car coming into Murray's corner for the final time to close out this lap. 0.4 of an improvement at 2:06. I'll tell you what, if the track does go towards optimal conditions, then that could seriously be a car that could start to knock on the door of the sub 2 minute times. Jarnier in the number 3 Porsche has been getting up to speed with this car. I know he felt a little bit battered and bruised, I think, from yesterday's SRO Esports race in the Aston Martin, but he was showing some really good pace in this car over the last few events. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the likes of him, Marco Bischoff as well, of course, absolute weapon in the Porsche, and also his teammates from K Kramer Racing Esports, Henrik Gamble, Noel Reeder. They've been showing some really good pace on the 1.9 update as well. Henrik Gamble was really making a bid at the front of the field in the previous generation of Porsche at Laguna Seca, which, because of BOP reasons, was actually the faster of the two generations at I think that was round 3 of the championship. Last car, I think, potentially to close out a lap. Steinbrenner, no, we do have one more still out on circuit. Oh dear, we've got 2 more. One of them is Bukowski, who has put it in the wall. And the last one then is Matteo Noldi in the number 25 Aston Martin. Not a car that has traditionally been very quick around here. It is I think maybe more competitive potentially than it was. Unfortunately, the Aston just doesn't tend to really have much in the way of, you know, really being able to throw it through a lot of the corners. Doesn't have that agility. Very predictable car, and, you know, tends to be one that performs much better in endurance events where longevity, consistency, time management, and also fuel consumption as well are those kind of more important aspects. But in terms of raw pace, it's is only a few drivers that tend to really be able to extract the very maximum from that car, because it's a tricky platform to really get good pace from. So, heading out onto the circuit to lead them away is Timo Karppinen, who has switched over to this Lamborghini. He was on fire at Laguna Seca when we had those tricky wet conditions, was really putting the pressure to some of those drivers at the front of the field, but did end up losing out a bit in terms of strategy. I think also there may have been some incidents involved in that race as well, so the Finnish driver dropped a little bit further down, but definitely showing good promise for the Italian outfit. A car that is, you know, one that I think people want to see at the pointier end of the grid. You know, there's very few people I know that don't like a Lamborghini. Makes a wonderful noise, they look good, and this Evo edition of this car definitely performs a lot better than its predecessor. And straight line speed is a pretty decent point of this car, although I am aware of the fact that BOP-wise, I think there was some ballast that was chucked onto this car that was affecting it a little bit. But maybe with 1.9.2, I don't know the exact ins and outs of those BOP changes, but it wouldn't surprise me if maybe Lamborghini's been giving a little bit of a helping hand to be a bit more competitive at the front. Either that, or possibly towards the 296, which I know are actual facts at certain circuits actually had minus ballast, which is not all too common. I think I had minus 15 kilos at quite a few tracks, which is why it was just as speedy as it was. So it'd be interesting to see how that has changed, because unfortunately I don't quite have those details to provide you with the exact changes that have taken place. But we'll go on board with Teemu as he looks to begin this lap in the Lamborghini around Bathurst for the same first time in this qualifying session. We do now have optimal track conditions, same sort of temperature, but should be a little bit quicker. Down in towards Hell's Corner then for the first time. Really want to dip the wheels into that camber, drag you through a corner. Got a bit of a kick of oversteer though. Traction not exactly the friend of the Finnish drivers. He now climbs up the mountain for the very first time into what is a very tricky braking zone of Griffin's Bend. And you will see drivers trying to attempt overtakes here, but they have to commit to that inside line. You have to have a massive overlap if you want to go for the outside there, because the camber is so strong that it just leaves you hanging out straight. Also, the marbles are all chucked out in that part of the circuit as well. Now up into the cutty, tricky double apex. I had a little bit of hesitation on the power then from the Lamborghini, so that will affect his speed as he climbs up through the next series of corners. Flat as he goes through 5 and 6, 7 in towards 8 and 9. Now up as close to the concrete as he dares into McPhillamy Park. Tricky here into this part of the circuit. Got to be so careful not to touch grass on the outside. Now in towards the skyline through the S's as you flurry your way through each of these apexes. Got to go down the gears bit by bit on the power as early as you can though on the exits of turn 15 through this next series of lefts and rights, and then got to watch out for that power. There it is. Kinks out right in the middle of the apex. Got to be so careful not to turn in too early there, and then follow through 19 in towards the chase at turn 20, carrying all of that speed down the Conrod straight. This is ready where you really want that top speed performance, and it's that big trade-off. Do you want the performance in the corners over the mountain? Do you want the confidence, or do you go for the overtaking potential in towards turn 21? Spotting the apex nicely there on the power. How's he through 22? Easy. Doesn't end up running onto a curb whatsoever. Now in towards 23, Murray's Corner. Tricky one to get right. Sometimes use a little bit of curb on the exit. Some drivers a bit more aggressive on the outside than others, and a 2-minute point 3 from Karppinen. So I tell you what, if we look for the likes of some of these Ferraris and the Mercedes as well, I'm trying to find Nicholas Huben in the field. Whereabouts is this man? Because if we're already down into the low 2 minutes, I think we could seriously see some bids for the 59s around here today. Huben absolutely wringing the neck out of the number 6 car. The Unicorns of Love livery, very distinctive, and is currently the car that tops the championship standings. Valentin Barry, good effort from him. Your silver class winner from SRO yesterday, getting to grips with that 296 very nicely. And I think in the Lamborghini for the Pro Series, but already finding good pace in that car as well is the French driver, currently on the front row alongside Karppinen and Korekas on a 2-minute point 6, displaced so by Hutchison, the Canadian driver, in the number 4 Lamborghini. What's it going to be for Huben though? And he goes to the provisional front row on a 2-minute point 4. So right now, purple in sector 1 and 2, but that middle sector, who I imagine it is in the hands of Teemu Karppinen. Lamborghini then performing very well over the top of the mountain, and it isn't too shabby through the first and final parts of the lap either. I'll tell you what, Teemu is taking some more time out of this car on this lap as well. Sasha Vasta has gone into the pits, maybe looking to make a couple of adjustments to his car before he heads out onto the track once more. Big improvements also further down the order for the likes of Inestrosa, Lateo, and Bischoff as well. Bayech in the number 12 car, currently sitting in P9, 2/10s up on his lap time, but the driver that's first to make an improvement by the looks of it is going to be Karppinen, trying to already better his time. But I tell you what, Huben is looking quick. Karppinen, what can he do? It's not going to be a 1:59. I don't think it's a 2-minute point 2. Huben's up by 2/10 of a second. Next across the line is the likes of Walsingham. He goes and improves to a 2-minute point 7. Oh my goodness, look at this from Nicholas Huben. 3/10 up. This could be an absolutely mighty time from the Mercedes. We'll see how he gets on. Hutchinson is just a little bit further up the road. Bischoff getting a beautiful toe. I think that's Soldatov in the BMW just in front of him. Almost might cause him a little bit of grief, though, in the last couple of corners. Bischoff is gaining continuously, and he's looking towards the inside, but Soltov is on a lap as well. This is awkward for the two-time Pro Series champion, and Soltov's gone wide as well on the exit. Bischoff, though, is going to climb up the order to the provisional front row, and Korekos has immediately displaced it. We've got Hutchinson coming towards the line next as well. I think Valentin Barrier isn't too far away either. Hutchinson goes up to P2. What is it for Huben, though? He's been quick on this lap so far. It's going to be mighty close, and he has managed to displace Karppinen, but maybe not for all too long, because it's 3/10 up is the time. You can see it was slow in the final sector on the last lap from Karppinen, and he's absolutely rocketing his way through into Forest Elbow. Like I said, he showed good pace last season in the BMW, and he is absolutely looking on fire right now in this number 8 Lamborghini. We saw it have good pace at Laguna Seca. I wasn't sure how it was going to fare at Bathurst, but right now the Finnish driver is absolutely flying and could seriously be putting in a bid to be the first man under that 2-minute mark. We do tend to see more cumulative improvements in times now with the 1.9 update, because the tyres, they do take a little bit longer to get up to temperature and pressure, and he gained even more in that final braking zone into 21 and 22 into Murray's corner. He goes through the final one. It's a big improvement for Karppinen. It's a monstrous time, a 1:59.6. He doesn't just go sub 2 minutes, he absolutely destroys the benchmark. And that is a statement and a half from the Grip Hacks engineering car. Still 7 minutes on the clock. But my goodness, Valentin puts in a good effort, 59.9, the next of the Lamborghini, so maybe this is the car to have for this round. The only two drivers so far to be sub 2 minutes. Let's see how the Lithuanian driver, the number 1 man, not just in the server, but on the LFM platform as well. 3/10 up. It's a good lap time from Korekos so far. He's going to be dancing around the front row. I don't think he's got enough to contend with the likes of Karppinen at this point in time, though. Through Murray's corner, the Jardier just up ahead. And for Korekos, it's just shy of going under 2 minutes, and it goes into P4 for the time being. Whereabouts have we got some of our other drivers? Further down the order, we have the likes of Jan Joek. He's coming into the final corner now in the number 23 Mercedes. A small improvement to get into the top 20. Lohan van den Eijden returning to the championship. Been a long time since we've seen the Belgian driver, so good to have him back. Currently in 29th position. Steinbrenner, who we saw be very quick in the practice session, hasn't set a representative lap time as of just yet, but very much improving over his previous best. We saw him get down into the 201, so he should be pretty easy to get towards the top 25, I think. But whether or not under these other track conditions, if he can find the extra half a second maybe to do a 2 minute, let's see what's it going to be. Oh, and he does. 11th place for the German driver, 2:07. Nicely done for the M4. In actual fact, let's have a little bit of a look at the... as we go on and have a look at Dario Bejic in the number 12 Lamborghini. Just have a look and see what about our manufacturers. And oh dear, well, that's rather disappointing. We could only see a few of them there. I believe that's because the new cars, unfortunately, still aren't working in some of the things with the graphics. I do apologise for that, so I'm afraid we can't see some of those. But what we can see is another Lamborghini has gone towards the pointy end of the field. Right now we have Lamborghini on the two Lamborghinis on the front row, followed by a Mercedes and a Porsche, and then Bejic and Hutchinson locking out the third row of the grid right now. In the next of the Lamborghini pairings, a big support in the chat for Teemu Karppinen. And understandably so, what a lap from the Finnish driver, and I think he is going to be very happy with that benchmark at the moment. We've got the likes of Mattia De Campo in the number 9 Ferrari. Had good pace at Spa, if I recall correctly, for Shizou GT Omega. Oh, gets very close to the wall. They're dancing on the limit of grip. I'll tell you what, you could really play with the back end of these cars now in 1.9, but I'm not quite sure whether or not the Italian driver would have been wanting to dance around on the rear tyres quite that much, but certainly was pushing it to his absolute limits. Is continuing to match his previous best. I'm not sure he's going to improve on this lap. Someone is at the moment, Steinbrenner, up by 0.4 of a second. That would see him make it into the tail end of the top 10 if he can carry that margin to the end of the lap for the number 14 car. In towards Murray's he goes, clipping that final apex. Tidy exit as well, and he is going to go into the top 5. Nicely done in the final sector from Steinbrenner then. A 2-minute 0.2, only a 10th adrift of Grantis Correcas, but Teemu Karppinen's time right now still looking really quite untouchable. Let's go on board with the number 3 car of Jardier in this screaming Porsche. Makes a hell of a noise, and in towards Forest Elbow. He's going to get a nice double toe effect from a couple of drivers here. I think we've got perhaps Lohan van den Einde and I think it was Manuel Fuchs in front of him in the number 24 car. Maybe a little bit away, but won't compromise him in the same way that we saw Marco Bischoff losing out in the final sector when he got a bit cozy with Solstov in the last couple of corners. Let's see what Jaroslav Honza can do. Tidy through those couple of turns. 2/10 up is the improvement at the moment. It would help him get back into the top 10, but he needs to find a bit more time if he wants to challenge to the pointier end of the grid. A bit of a hesitation getting on the power. You heard him clip the apex a bit too strongly, and as a result, only good enough to get to P9 for the time being. Huben's on an improvement as well. He's found a 10th. Oh, that's a big slide for the German driver into the wall. Heavy impact for the Unicorns of Love car. And who's that coming around? I think that might be Sasha Vassner in the Mercedes. One of the other Mercedes. So maybe Huben has reached his limit. He's still trying to push for that 59, and the Mercedes, whilst definitely a competitive package, the Lamborghini at the moment still looking like it is an absolute weapon around this circuit, which is not something I would have been particularly expecting, but it's a welcome change. Of course, we do always tend to have this sort of natural balance where there's going to be a car that works as one circuit and is exceptionally quick somewhere else, but then maybe it's a bit more mid-pack in other aspects. But it seems that maybe the new king of the mountain maybe towards the Raging Bull. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this session plays out. Also in terms of how qualifying pace translates over to race pace, and see whether or not, you know, tyre wear used to be a bit more of an issue for the Lamborghini. Now it's just mostly an issue for everybody. Although 1.9 update trying to keep these tyres alive for as long as possible. Hutchinson, big improvement for him in the final corner. 3/10 up for the Canadian. It's good enough for P3 to make it. Lamborghini 1, 2, 3. It's almost like Spa all over again. As in Astros, I think, will be rounding out the lap in just a second as well in the Porsche. Currently sitting behind the two Porsches of Bischoff and Jardier, and he displaces a pair of them up to P8 for the man from Chile. We've also got Matis Lateo in the Audi. Seen him drive this car quite a bit. Seems to get on well with this car. The performance that it has, that's wide through there, and he's going to lose time on the exits of both of those corners there. So you see he's dropped 2/10 as a result of that. Just got a little bit greedy on the entry there. Maybe better to rectify a bit of a lap on the exit of 23. It is an improvement, but not good enough to change position. We've got Solstov, who is on an improvement as well. 2/10 up for the number 5 car, and he is looking to try to close down what is a surprising gap, actually. Margins really tighten up. There's a big gap between Karppinen and Valentine, and then it's 0.02 of a second between Barrett and Hutchinson, and then it's very small margins all the way down from there to be just outside the top 10, and it's a 3/10 gap between Solstov and Jardier. So it is, you know, there's a bit of a threshold here for some of these cars, but Solstov is looking to try to close at that margin somewhat, and I think he might be able to just about break his way. Can he? He does! Into the top 10, the M4 goes, and just behind the likes of Steinbrenner. Let's see, Karppinen pushing along. Oh dear, I'm pushing a bit too hard in the Lamborghini that time. So you can see that was how good that previous lap was. And I'll tell you what, no one inside the top 7 is going to improve. And it's all coming down to this man to maybe make a bid towards the front end of the grid. Carpenter right now looks like he might have it safe for pole position. I think that might be his first pole position in the Case King Pro Series as well, if I'm not mistaken. So fantastic work from him. It did look like an absolutely stellar lap. Only Bayich and Schaefer and Ferris further down the order are improving. It will be the number 12 Lamborghini that's the first one across the line. Let's see what Dario can do, ringing it over the final curb there up towards P6. As the next car is Ferris. I think actually that was Lowen van den Einde. Excuse me, that was the next one there, but I don't think did improve, but stays in P30. 4 tenths up though for Oliver Ferris in the number 29 car. Robin Schaefer's had a moment over the mountain, and for Oliver Ferris, it's good enough for 21st position. So good stuff from him for a late bid to work his way up the order. Oh, what a session that was! What a lap from Teemu Carpenter. The Lamborghini's showing to be very, very fast around here today, but you still have to be on your absolute A game if you want to make it work. And Carpenter did an absolutely stellar job to really pull that one out of the bag there. And also, there we go. I was trying to work out how I could move some things around so we can go through our starting grid properly in just a moment. Like I say, unfortunately, we won't have the normal cameras to do this with, so apologies for that. So I have to go for a bit more of a conventional approach for this one, but stellar effort from the Grip Hacks engineering car. That support in the chat, I'm sure, will have been very, very happy at the end of that session, seeing the number 8 car take the first pole position, I think, for that team. So Teemu Carpenter then lines up on the front row in the Lamborghini, making it a lockout all the way down to 3rd place, because Valentin Barrier for Yassi Esports. We've seen him at the pointy end of the field before, and this is the closest he's been to maybe having some race-winning pace in a long time. So could be an interesting battle between those two at the front of the pack. Jade Hutchinson getting another good qualifying and starts in P3. Nicholas Huben, your championship leader, starts just ahead of his championship rival, Grantis Korekas, who lines up in P5, the first of the Porsches by quite a few spots. So good effort there from Lithuanian. Dario Bayich starts in P6 in that number 12 Lamborghini with Nils Steinbrenner in the number 14 BMW. Great effort there from the German driver, really starting to eke out some good pace from that platform. Marco Bischoff starting in P8 ahead of Angel Inestrosa, the next one of the Porsches in the field, and next one of the Yas Heat cars as well, with Soldatov, the next of the M4s to round out the top 10. Starting in P11 then is Aidan Walsingham in the number 11 car for Visceral Esports. So he continues to get to grips with that Ferrari 296, and then Jardier in the number 3 Porsche starts in P12. And no, we can't quite see any better with that camera either. Sasha Vassner starts in P13 with Matas Lateo, the first and possibly one of the only Audis in the grid, starting in P14. And Yanyo, good qualifying session from him in to start P15. Bearing in mind the number plates correspond to the relative ELO in the server, so if the relative ELO is that much higher than the starting position, then that is a good session. And Yanyo doing just that. De Campo starting in 16th with Robbie Stapleford starting in 17th place in the Aston Martin. Then we have Carl Natter in the next one of the Porsches. The number 18 starting in number 18, 18th place. Matteo Noldi starts in 19th, the first of the Aston Martins. Excuse me, actually second after Robbie Stapleford, with Manuel Fuchs rounding out the top 20. Ahead of this man, Oliver Ferris, who was able to move up the order in the closing stages of qualifying to start in 21st place. Nikolai Polikov in the number 19 Porsche starts in 22nd position, with Robin Schaefer in the number 10 car, starting down in 23rd. Maybe we've been wanting to get a little bit more pace out of that car. with some of those other Porsches starting at the pointier end of the grid. Schneckenberger in next of the Mercedes starts in 24th position, with Nico Penman, the Finnish driver, starting in 25th place. Jan Drexler in the number 22 car, sporting the BMW this season once more, in 26th, and down in 27th position, Samir Fock, who was 4th at Spa. Not a good qualifying session for him, and I imagine he'll be a bit disappointed with that one. Christian Makowski in 28th place, ahead of Michael Frey, the Swiss driver, starting in 29th position, with Lohan van den Einde, the Belgian driver, starting in 30th place. And the last car on the grid, but certainly not least, is Samuel Ratz in 31st in the next of the Ferraris. So good stuff from all of the drivers as we look to make our way into this race. So we will have 60 minutes of action here for this evening, and Teemu Karppinen, with that stellar pole position, will be the man that leads them towards turn 1 for the very first time. And lap 1, it's going to be very busy, there's no doubt about that whatsoever. We'll also get the overlay sorted, ready for when we get underway. Mandatory pit stop, as always, for these drivers as well, and they will have to serve that in a central pit window for this race as well. Looks like on the weather front, it's looking pretty clear. We have a completely dead wind, so it's highly unlikely that we're going to see much changing in the way of conditions. So if qualifying pace is anything to go by, these Lamborghinis at the pointy end of the grid, it could seriously be a three-way fight between Karppinen, Barrier, and Hutchinson. The margins were very close, although Karppinen on one lap pace at least was absolutely stellar. But whether or not he can maintain that in the race over this very tricky circuit, consistency is what wins you the race around here. Of course, every race that these drivers go to, their consistency is pushed, but you have to be absolutely pixel perfect around here. And as soon as you get it wrong, it is a big impact usually, because there is concrete, there is gravel, and with all the undulation and just the nature of the twistiness of the circuit, if you get it wrong in one place, that tends to have the repercussion of where you are on the track for the next corner. And even if you gather up one moment, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to bring it all together by the time you get to the next corner. So it is seriously a testament to these drivers in the Pro Series when they're able to extract that sort of alien-like pace. If you are enjoying what you are watching this evening, then do also consider subscribing to the channel. We are rapidly approaching 2,500 subs, which would be an amazing achievement, and it is an absolute pleasure to have each and every one of you joining along the way. And yeah, the Pro Series drivers are going to be putting on a heck of a show for us tonight, I have no doubt. They always do, but when you combine that with a circuit like Mount Panorama, we are always in for a treat. We've seen dramatic things in the past as well. I think probably the most famous one was with another Unicorns of Love Mercedes car. Florian Duacop was leading the race by a country mile, and then on the penultimate lap, he got it all wrong, going in towards the dipper and got major damage on the front of that car. Was very fortunate to be able to keep on pointing more or less in the right direction, despite the heavy damage that the front of his car took. And he had to limp it home, and he had Grantis Correcas and I think also Marco Bischoff that were hot on his heels on the closing lap of the race, but he did just about manage to take victory. So even when there's big margins out of this circuit, it can all come down to the wire. So drivers getting into formation. Just imagine the Valentine will close the gap up a little bit. So it does seem perhaps like Carpenter's got a bit of an advantage at the moment, but it does look like everyone's coming into line now. So for 60 minutes of absolutely fantastic action, I am sure, around Bathurst tonight, it will be Teemu Karppinen who takes his first pole position in the Case King Pro Series, Will he be able to convert it into his first victory, or will honours for first victory go to the Frenchman that joins him on the front row? We're about to find out. For 60 minutes of action, waiting for the green lights to go, and there we go, and it's green lights away. Good start at the front row of the grid, and immediately pulling over to the right-hand side of the circuit is your race leader as they go in towards turn 1. It's a dream start for Carpenter. Immediately under pressure in the mid-pack is some of the rest of the field already going side by side as they head up towards Griffin's Bend for the first time. Going to have to look at a series of stages if we can. Defending the inside line is Valentine, and he is going to hold on to that position. But what about the likes of Beich? He can't go around the outside of Korekas, showing the straight line speed of the Porsche as they now head up towards the cutting for the first time. Clear away almost by a second is your race leader of Teemu Karppinen as they fly through that series of corners for the first time, getting busy in the mid-pack there. I saw side-by-side action. Jardier still in P11 at the moment. In fact, he's gained a position. I think it's Walsingham that's dropped a couple, and it's already kicked off. Robin Schaefer, I've unfortunately clicked off the overlay, so that's not going to help anybody. Robin Schaefer is around on the exit of the cutting. But unfortunately, with all the action that we've got going on, I'm not going to be able to see how that all took place. But for the most part, it's been a relatively clean start. 1.2 seconds a gap for Carpenter. He is wasting no time at all. But whether or not that is a car that is just taking a bit more out of its tyres early on, we'll have to wait and see. First drag race down the Conrod straight for the first time. Carpenter doesn't have to worry about anybody. 1.5 seconds now. Here's a gap. I'll tell you what, Huben's got some company, and it's only in the form of his championship rival, also Beich versus Bischoff in the background as well. So we've got a couple of fights heading towards turn 21 for the first time. Hutchinson may be having a bit of a sniff for P2 as well, so it's all kicking off. Camera is not helping us as they head in towards 21. Hutchinson can't do it, but Marco Bischoff down the inside for the two-time Pro Series champion. He makes his way up into P6, and it gets very busy because here comes the likes of Inestroza trying to capitalise on all that bunching up. Looks one way, but the gap gets closed off and almost contact into the back of Steinbrenner as they head in towards Murray's Corner for the first time. Carpenter, though, still leads by 1.5 seconds. Mighty opening lap from your pole sitter. Lateo and Walsingham side by side towards turn 1 as well, but Walsingham is going to have to sit behind the Audi. In actual fact, he's got a little bit of company from Jan Joog in the Mercedes at the moment. Next drag race towards Griffin's Bend takes place. Hutchinson looking for a way through. Valentine, the Frenchman, having to go defensive on that inside line, and Hutchinson needs wise. He doesn't look sticking around the outside because Huben absolutely buried into the diffuser of that Lamborghini. And he will be looking to capitalise on any opportunity where a gap opens up because he wants to put as much distance between himself and his championship rival Korekas as he can. Other cars flying their way in towards the cutting now. Schneckenberger close to the back of Mattia De Campo. A little bit of weaving on the exit there. You can see everyone having slightly different ways of getting the power down, but he is absolutely nose to tail through this part of the lap. It's so tricky to follow cars through here and not go into the concrete. You saw Stapleford absolutely pushing it to the limits, and it gets very, very uneasy at times, especially from a spectator's point of view. These drivers, they're used to it. This is what they live for. But us, it gets us on the absolute edge of our seats. No calamities, though, it seems, through the mountain this time around. Close stuff, though, at the front of the field once more. Hutchinson closing the gap to Valentine, 2.2 seconds. Karppinen absolutely glued to the circuit over the top of the mountain. He continues to extend his lead. Let's see, though, what can Hutchinson do? That's what the camera wanted. There we go, as we head in towards the chase then, and he isn't quite going to be able to get the move done. A little bit too far away from the Frenchman in front. Again, apologies for some of the camera work. Don't have quite the same arsenal as usually do with this, so it will be a bit of jankiness from time to time. Oh, Beich has gone around! Beich has gone around further down the order after being in such a strong position. The number 12 car finds himself pointing the wrong way, and he's having to let everybody go by. Disappointing stuff there. He does get going eventually, but that is a major disappointment for him. Soltov and Jardier having a fight as well inside the top 10, but not able to have any exchanges of position as of just yet. Huber now the one applying the pressure to Hutchinson. Does he think about looking up the inside? No, too much on the line to risk with that. What about Jan Joog versus Walsingham, though? Walsingham trying to find an opportunity. He's got the inside line, and Mercedes going to be hung out to dry. Carl Natter trying to capitalise on this as well. We've gone on board the number 18 car, trying to go around the outside to get in towards the cutting now. Can't go there, and in the end has to concede behind number 23 car. Almost gets a face full of Mercedes in his rearview mirror at the same time. But at the front end of the pack, Hutchinson still applying the pressure to Valentine, who just seems to be lacking a little bit of pace over top of the mountain, and it's being a little bit of a cork in the bottle potentially for these 4 cars, and it's allowing Karppinen to really eke away. As our next casualty is Polyakov, who at least does seem to have managed to keep out of the wall. That was a big moment for Michael Frey coming through there, trying to go around the outside. That's surely not going to work, and he's got to be careful not to gather it up into the wall, and he does keep it pointing in the right direction, thankfully, for the Swiss driver. But major moment saved there from the Porsche of Polyakov. Hutchinson versus Valentine again, though, as he looks to make a move. The Canadian driver does stick it out the inside, in through the chase egg, hop over the bump, but they manage to get through there safe and sound. Valentine defends that inside line, and he spots his braking point very nicely. In actual fact, it was a good exit as well from turn 22 for the number 6 Mercedes. Can't do anything. You heard a bit of a lift as well, not wanting to get too close for comfort to the back of that Lamborghini. What about the likes of Jardier versus Soldatov? Soldatov coming under increasing pressure on board the diffuser of the BMW, and it looks like that Porsche may have the run that it needs towards Hell Corner for the number 3 car. Down the inside he goes. Who's going to come out on top of this one? Soldatov sent towards the outside. He does concede the position in the end then. So Jardier up into P9, gaining 3 positions, and Hutchinson is having to go defensive this time around as the Unicorns love Mercedes around the outside. He goes, but he's going to be hung out to dry there, and Koreka says thank you very much, and I'll have some extra points for my championship tally if you don't mind, and close that gap out top of standings. And what's happened to Matis Lateo? Further down the order, Lateo, and there is damage on the front of that car, losing a ton of positions as they go up towards the cutting. Oh, that's a mistake there from Stapleford as well. Back end of the Aston Martin giving away underneath. The British driver has a tap on the right rear corner. Just about manages to gather it up though, and I think only loses maybe 1 position in the process. But the Aston not having the level of stability that he would have wanted, and that is where Bathurst just bites very quickly as well. That was someone else losing. I think that was Oliver Ferris that was having the back end step out there. White flag out for Manuel Fuchs. Not sure if he had a moment through into Skyline. It seems like everyone is just about okay for the time being. Let's go have a look at the front of the pack, though. Hutchinson, Korekas, Barrier, all still fighting for these podium spots. Karppinen has checked out 2:06 on the last lap. Mighty time from your race leader and your pole sitter, who is looking to make this a dream day behind the wheel of that Lamborghini. Hutchinson nor Korekas able to close up and make a move up on this occasion. Someone that might have a go, though, Stapleford. He might have had that moment a lap or so ago, but down the inside he looks towards Lateo, but the Audi is good under brakes, and he manages to chop off the nose of the Aston, who will have to wait for another opportunity elsewhere. So it's Karppinen that leads, followed by Barrett, then Hutchinson, then Korekas. Huben back in the fight as well. Staying composed is the man in the Mercedes. And you see Steinbrenner and the likes of Innestroza a bit further back. Bischoff, if these drivers fight, may be able to close up and make it a 5-way scrap for position as well. Hutchinson almost pushing Valentine along in towards turn 2 then, but he can't quite get enough of a run to get alongside. Maybe slightly different strategies in terms of downforce. White flag for Schneckenberger there. Maybe just had a bit of a lift off, I'm not sure. Doesn't look like too much of an issue for the Mercedes, at least for the time being. But you see these cars absolutely densely packed over the mountain, and that's the issue. Commentator Kirsten Steckenberger's gone right into the back of De Campo, whose luck continues to fall apart, unfortunately, and that's an awkward place to rejoin as well. The Ferrari will get going again, but I imagine that'll be a penalty coming the way of the Mercedes, as De Campo still stranded in the cutting. As who is that going around there? I think that's the number 10 car. Oh dear, that's getting awkward. Oh, it gets worse. That is not what either of those drivers would have wanted. DeCampo, well, DeCampo's going exploring in an entirely different direction now. He's got half a lap to figure this one out. He's given up with regards to damage, and Robin Schaefer's had enough, retired into the pits. And there may well be something to be said about that. And the age-old phrase of hold your brakes. And I'll tell you what, hold your horses at the moment, because Hutchinson looking towards the inside of Barrett, but he can't make it stick towards 21 there. He's got company of Korekas right on his gearbox as they head out of 22 and down towards Murray. You can see little bits of a middle-of-road defence from the number 4 car. 3 seconds now, your gap from your race leader to the man in P2. So Carpenter continuing to extend his lead. And last time round was half a second quicker than any of these drivers. Some mighty times at the front of the field as the next drag race begins towards turn 2. I don't think anything's possibly going to happen on this occasion. It's so tricky to tell because it really does ramp up at the end. I'll tell you what, Huben's got a pretty good run onto the back of Korekas, and Korekas knows that he's going defensive as they get up towards Griffin's Bend there, but he can't go around the outside. He will have to stay in P5 for the time being, but Marco Bischoff's joining the party. Look at that camera shot as all these cars fly on by in towards the cutting where all the carnage took place moments ago. And let's stick with these cars. Tell you what, let's actually stick on board the front splitter of Huben. Let's get a feel of the sense of speed as you head over the top of the mountain, as you follow some of the greatest drivers on the platform around one of the trickiest circuits. You see the Porsche and the Lamborghinis just extend a little bit as they head into some of these fast corners, and that's where that sort of natural lack of agility in the Mercedes starts to bite back, but the confidence in the electronics and the stability that the car has through a dipper reels the time immediately back in. And then here and playing with the gears and going for a bit of an early upshift, trying to make sure he stays out of the TC and gets as much power to those rear tyres as he possibly can. Marco Bischoff has had a bit of a moment, I think, on the last lap there, dropped to a second away from these guys this time around. Huben closing in the slipstream to correct. As you can see, though, that Porsche is no slouch, but right at the end of the zone there, as Hutchinson was looking for a move on Barrett once again, but he couldn't quite make anything stick. Very close between these drivers. What about Walsingham, who's been making his way up through the order after trying to recover, losing some positions on the opening lap. Can't make it stick this time around. What about the likes of Matteo Naldi? He can't. Bolikov, same goes for him as well. Glued to the back of Jan Drexler in that BMW. Maybe can make a move up in towards 23, though. He shows the nose. He's late on the brakes. Number 19 car sends one up the inside. Catches Drexler napping there. Gets the power down. And the acceleration is good in the Porsche. And in actual fact, the BMW Drexler now has McCoskey for some company as well. And that 296 is very quick. And a straight line almost kicking off at the top of the turn 2 then. It almost looked like a swapping of position. Was there flashing of lights there as well from the Mercedes? So maybe the Unicorns of Love Mercedes in the hands of Huben not too happy about the driving standards of his championship rival. And we shall try to see if we can, in fact, catch a replay of what took place then. So you can see, holding that inside line is Korekas. You can see the Mercedes sent towards the outside line then. I don't see anything too much in the way of sort of dramatics, but you see that there was the flashing of the lights. So in one form or another, for your championship leader, he wasn't particularly happy something that took place there, but it looks like it was pretty much fair game from what I could see in all of that. So we'll go back to live cameras now and see Korekas flying through Forest Elbow, as it's only a few tenths between all of these drivers battling from second to sixth position. Marco Bischoff might have had a bit of a poor lap not too long ago, but he's reeled in the time once again and is only 4 tenths behind Nicholas Huben, who is closing to the back of his Porsche as well, as the flat six rolls its way down towards 21. Valentine a little bit wide in the braking zone there, but it looks like he's kept it neat and tidy enough to hold this position for the time being. 3.7 seconds the gap now for Carpenter, so he's just managing to eke away a little bit of a margin as Stapleford sends one up the inside of Lateo. He's going to rejoin. Oh, and there's contact. I can see it coming from a million miles away. There's further contact on the exit there as well. Lateo is going to lose a position, I think, to both Pennon and Matteo Noldi as well, and potentially from Oliver Ferris on the run up towards turn 1. I'm not even sure if Stapleford has got going again. He has eventually, but contact there, and that was tricky between those two. I don't think I'll be able to quite catch it on the replay again, but we did get a pretty good view of what happened there. It was deep from the British driver, and I think just ended up forcing the tail a bit wide, but I'm sure that Stapleford would argue that the rejoin could have been more cautious, perhaps, from the Frenchman. It was the smallest of contact between the two sets of wheel arches of those cars, but unfortunately, severe consequences for the pair of them then, as Bajic has just lost another position to Schneckenberger, so damage all bouncing on the exit there from the Mercedes, but that Lamborghini I think is running potentially a little bit wounded after what we saw, and runs wide as well through the cutting there, but he is continuing to try to recover his way up through the order. But last lap then, was 6/10 slower than Schneckenberger in the Mercedes. White flag for Sasha Vassner. Looks like it was fairly okay through that very twisty part of the circuit, and doesn't look like anything major was particularly lost. So regrouping at the front of the pack then after just 15 minutes of action. Valentine still having to be very, very much aware of all of those cars behind him that are hunting. Hutchinson, Korekas, Huben, and Bischoff again making a mistake on the last lap, and has dropped now back to a second away or so. So he may have the pace, but consistency is a little bit lacking at the moment from the two-time Pro Series champion, as pushing along on the exit of the turn 22 in towards Murray's corner. That's getting tricky. Can't the tear, and Walsingham now side by side with Walsingham sending one up the inside as the overtaker turns into the overtaken. Walsingham in that 296 trying to make it stick on the inside towards turn 1. I think he's going to manage it, and a bit of a twitch there as well for the Porsche, and Sasha Vassner will immediately be on the Mercedes case. In actual fact, he's already pulled out of the slipstream, so he tries to get alongside on the run up in towards turn 2. As the camera a little bit slacking in trying to catch up with the cars as they get up towards Griffin's Bend. They're defensive from the Porsche, but the straight line speed is sufficient to keep Vassner behind for the time being. Someone, though, who is having a bit more trouble is Murkowski versus Drexler, and it's the BMW that's lost out in that one. Another one of the 296s making their way up a position in towards turn 2 then. Close between our front runners. Hutchinson again has gone board with the Lamborghini. Going to get a great deal of visibility out of the front window of this car. But what you do get is just a sense of speed, the proximity to these barriers in more ways than one, as he closes down on the Frenchman. Got to be so careful of that apex there, as that barrier juts out again. Bischoff, he makes a mistake, but now immediately back within 0.4 of a second of this pack. And there's a mistake. There's a yellow flag out for Murkowski. Oh, and it's a big impact, and it's getting very busy. This is what kicks off on the mountain. Everyone doing a phenomenal job to stay out of issue there, and it's Samir that's been caught up in that as well. And I think we should just about have time to hopefully have a look and see if we can catch what happened here. So the number 16 car, I think... Oh, he's had contact on the entry there. He's got it all wrong under braking, lost the car, heads right into the middle of the circuit. Oh, an evasive action from two cars there. Unfortunately, not quite good enough. A little bit of a bump from one of the other 296s as well. But unfortunately, just inevitable with level chaos, and both of those drivers have since gone to the pit. So unfortunate stuff from them, and the mountain ends up getting two more victims to his name, as Michael Frey is also in the pits. Was he the Porsche? He was, and taking heavy damage on the front of that car. Remember, unfortunately, these pit stops are not within the pit window. I'm surprised that Frey maybe didn't stay out a little bit longer to try to see if he could at least repair the damage in his mandatory pit stop. Meanwhile, it's going very busy for the battle for P17 then. Lateo wounded, being closed down by the likes of Matteo Naldi, who was being sent into the wall there, and that was an actual fact. No, it was Lateo, but in the end, got sent into the wall. Naldi went with him, and then Ferris, Drexler, Pendant have all benefited out of that. I can only look in so many places at once. I don't know if I'm going to be able to catch a replay. Our front runners running very close to one another as well, and it's action absolutely top to bottom in this field. And I said that Bathurst was going to do this, and we have certainly, I think, had a race so far that's delivered on that promise. At some point when I can catch my breath, I'll try to have a look at the stewards' inquiries, because I imagine that there's a few that have gone up so far. There's a lot of no further actions. Not entirely unsurprising. Bathurst does, unfortunately, lead to, a lot of just small miscalculations that can have big consequences, even if no one is particularly to blame. Hutchinson, the closest he has been in a while, is sensed an opportunity. Middle of the road defending of the track from the Frenchman, still holds the Canadian driver just behind, but he loses momentum on the exit. And Korekas now gaining behind the Lamborghini. The acceleration of the Porsche is good. Looks up the inside in towards Murray's corner, but he can't make it stick. And Huben immediately decides to go into the pits. Now that's a surprise. Huben in the Mercedes, a car not exactly renowned for being the best taking care of its tyres. He's decided he wants to go in this in the pits straight away, unlock the pace of a fresh set of tyres on that car, and try to see if he can jump these drivers in front. But I tell you what, that's going to be tricky, because the undercut isn't quite as powerful. Depends how long they're out there for. As Hutchinson towards the outside he goes, and he knows it's not going to work, and he does back out of it wisely. Otherwise, Korekas, exactly in the same way that he took the position from Huben, will be there to pounce. In actual fact, he's doing a good enough job to look to put the Canadian driver under pressure as it stands anyway, and gives Valentine a little bit of breathing space. He hasn't had much camera action so far, but your race leader, Timo Karppinen, 5.5 seconds now, his lead, and he is still continuing to put in stellar lap after stellar lap. Amazing stuff so far from the Grip Packs engineering car, looking to take his first victory in the Pro Series, and that's to Campo. Oh dear, as the Italian driver's day goes from bad to worse. What has happened there for the 296? He is, unfortunately, all by himself by virtue of the incident he was involved in earlier. He has since come into the pits. Perhaps not too surprising. Comes into 21 then. Is he just going to take too much curb? And he does. And whilst you may be able to take a bit more curb in 1.9, unfortunately, as demonstrated by the Shizou driver, you can't quite take that much. So we will look to head back to live scenes now and see a lot of drivers coming into the pits. So maybe they know something that I don't. Maybe the undercut is very powerful around this circuit. I have to see how quick the likes of Hutchinson, Korekas, Barrier are all to respond. Karppinen, he hasn't got much to worry about, and nope, these drivers, they're staying out, and that doesn't entirely, it's not entirely unsurprising, although a surprise attack from Walsingham down the inside on the Mercedes. Jan Yoko is fighting on the exit, using all of the torque in the Mercedes. If he did want to come into the pits, he hasn't got an option now, because he's got a Ferrari on the inside of him. Pendant and Polikov also battling as well, and Walsingham is going to make up a position, and into a top 10, and it's all falling apart, I think, for Polikov. He did send one down the inside, I think, at 21 then. You can see he was gaining to the back of Nico Pendant. And what is going to happen here? They head in towards the chase. And which way does he look to go? Does he go down the inside? He's kind of stuck behind. Oh dear! And it's a little bit of one side then the other. Thankfully, no contact there between the pair of them. And a much safer rejoin from the number 19 car. At least avoids any further damage to anyone's races. But I'm not sure he'll be too happy with that from Pendant. Oh dear! We get a bit of a late camera shot from Michael Frey, who's stranded on the in the middle of the dipper. And now we have an awful spectator's camera of just looking at the carnage. There's your race leader, Karppinen, who would have had his heart in his mouth for a moment. Michael Frey It feels almost like Alonso actually watching at Brazil, watching everyone else in the race. But the number 30 car's really caught in a tricky spot now. He has very kindly parked it about as far out of the way as he possibly can. Meanwhile, I do need to quickly check in on Stapleford versus Samuel Ratz, and it's the Aston Martin driver who has got the move done on the entry towards 21 there. Michael Frey does eventually get going again, and in the number 30 car has unfortunately sustained even more damage. And I think, bearing in mind, Michael Frey, he did that extra pit stop, and now he's going to have to do an extra one to repair the damage. Obviously, he was already due that extra pit stop because he did that other pit stop outside of his pit window. As Korekis looking towards the inside of Murray's, but he's not quite close enough, and Hutchinson not falling for the move either. Carniter versus Jan Jog, an easy move by the looks of it for the Porsche in the end. Sasha Vassner isn't too far away from this fight either, and kindly indicating into the pits is Jan Jog. We don't see too many drivers doing that, but obviously feels the need to get a fresh set of boots on that car and see what he can unleash. Also, it'd be interesting to see where is Nicholas Huben at the moment, as Matteo Noldi almost puts a move on the BMW. So, where is Nicholas Huben? So he is down in P19, running around by himself at the moment, so he's got nice clean air. So this will be his first, I think, representative lap time, if I'm not mistaken, as a white flag, excuse me, for Korekis. What has happened there? For the Lithuanian driver, I think we're going to have to go back on the replay there, because he was absolutely glued to the back of Hutchinson versus Barrier for the battle for P2. Those two stayed in close proximity and just mighty deep on the brakes, and that's car control for you. The number one man on the LFM platform, and whilst he won't exactly be too happy about making that mistake, I think he will be extremely relieved that he did not cost himself a position there. Well, at least in terms of the cars that are around him at the moment. I'll tell you what, though, Nicholas Huben, if he has some clean laps on this undercut strategy, expect him to take that fourth place immediately back. So if we look back towards Huben, then last time around, 2:09 for Huben, so almost on par with his best lap times. And that is a pretty quick one. Karppinen was a 2:01.9 last time around. Maybe was just taking a bit of caution with Michael Frey over the middle of the dipper then. Low 201s seems to be sometimes from these other cars. So as Hutchinson, he now decides to react and go into the pits then. He wants to get a fresh set of tyres. So does Bischoff as well, with the likes of Korekis and Steinbrenner deciding to stay out. But I'm not sure right now that the margin that Huben has got, he certainly, I think, will overtake Korekis in the stops as Carniter, after having made up the move, decides to come into the pits as well. Now unleashes Sasha Vassner. That's, whether I'm sure that Huben will get the position over Korekis, but I'm not sure right now the undercut pace is going to be good enough to really look to make up positions over the likes of those Lamborghinis in front. Karppinen immediately back on the pace again, 2:07. So these tyres, they're lasting. They are not really losing much in the way of pace. See, Huben this time around, this might be a bit more in line with what we can expect from him over the next few laps. Of course, Hutchinson and Bischoff will be exiting the pits as well. And it's a 2:06 from Huben. Now, that was definitely a better lap. Hutchinson, though, as he comes out of the pits, there's the Mercedes, and will go on board with Huben, who understandably has come out in front of Bischoff, but no, it hasn't quite worked for him. And I'd say that more or less, if you can probably fit a Porsche between that Lamborghini and the Mercedes that we're currently on board with. So I'd say that overall, in terms of lap time, I'm not sure that Huben has particularly benefited. The only thing that you may be able to do is that as Hutchinson's tyres are coming up to temperature, the Mercedes may be able to strike, because it's going to be a tricky outlap for the number 4 car ahead over the mountain. We saw Karppinen at the beginning of the race doing a stellar job on heavy fuel and those cold tyres to negotiate this tricky sector. Whether or not Hutchinson can do the same is another matter. Race a winner, of course, Huben, I think took victory maybe in some previous seasons, but it's been a while, so we've been waiting for his return. And right now, Hutchinson, you see the agility of the Lamborghini, does manage to get a nice run through there. And I think when they head for that next run towards 21 there, I think he's going to be easily ahead to not have to fear too much pressure from the Mercedes. Meanwhile, Barrier and the likes of Korekis have also come into the pits. Oh, Mercedes is definitely closing. In actual fact, it's a bit of a better run than I was expecting. Obviously, the lack of tow from the Lamborghini that was originally pulling along the Canadian driver ahead has been a little bit on the detrimental side. And so it's all going to be about whether or not Korekis has he indeed dropped those positions. I'm fairly confident that he will have done. Valentine still looking to be released from the pits. It's going to be very close. Valentine just gets going underway now. So does Korekis. So whereabouts is the likes of Hutchinson and Hubert? It's going to be extremely close between these drivers as they carry the momentum. Korekis may even be vulnerable from Bischoff. I think he will just about have enough, though, to hold them all off. And the Frenchman of Barrier, has he got just about enough of a margin as they get towards turn 2? And I think he does. And again, this undercut hasn't been the most beneficial so far, but immediately Hutchinson, he's looking racy, he's looking towards the outside of the cutting, towards the inside he goes with a little bit of contact on the entry as well, and Barrier sent wide, and now he's got Hubert to deal with as well. He says thank you very much. It's side by side on the run up through this middle sector. Tricky stuff, brave stuff between these drivers, and the Lamborghini does drop both positions. And the Wilbur stewards have something to say about that. It was a dive towards the inside. We'll see if we can catch it in the replay. See if we go on board. Hutchinson here goes for this switchback. Oh, and even with the camera angle that we had there, obviously cutting off slightly the right-hand side of the screen. This is the view from Valentine just behind us. There was that Mercedes. Close wheel-to-wheel action between those two. And left each other just about enough space to get through there unscathed. But, like I say, the stewards may have something to say about that. And will, in the end, all that may have done is allowed Hubert to gain an extra couple of positions. Because if Valentine is now behind him and Hutchinson gets a penalty, the Unicorns love Mercedes, who has been so consistent so far this season, maybe about to take another very nice points haul. But that scrapping definitely would have compounded the effect of Karppinen's overcut that was already looking like it might be a pretty strong strategy, and he still hasn't decided to come in. He feels no need to, and I can understand why. See what his lap time was, 2:08 last time round. Karppinen still maintaining absolutely stellar pace. And for the first time in a while, we've only got sort of one close fight on the circuit, and that is Ferris versus Rats. And we'll try to have a bit of a look through the stewards' inquiries, shall we? We've got halfway through a race, and I haven't been able to look at it yet, as there's a 15-second penalty for the number 11 car. So that is Walsingham that got that, and maybe as a result of what happened early on in the race, Steinbrenner came out of the pits, and I think he might have jumped Marco Bischoff. I think Steinbrenner has actually managed to get ahead of Bischoff in the pit stops. And that goes to show that the overcut strategy and maybe those bits of scrapping as well may well have been the way to go. So good stuff there from the number 14 car to make up a position. We'll check back in with Ferris versus Rats. Number 27 car, 15-second time penalty. That is Schneckenberger. I think for that instance at the cutting then. And Ferris got a good run out of Murray's and looks towards the inside at Hell's Corner. There's going to be a drag race between the two 296s. As let's actually go for a little bit of an onboard rear diffuser. Oh, a bit too far away. This is Robbie Stapleford that's a bit further up ahead. But unfortunately the Ferraris turn into pixels by the time we get into that view. Ferris though versus Rats on the run in towards turn 2. 25 car on the inside, and he's going to hold that position all day long. And there's contact on the outside. I said the marbles are on the outside of that corner, and you just lose all the grip. And unfortunately, completely destabilizing the car for Ferris there, who then finds the wall. And that'll be some extra damage, unfortunately, knocking on the back of his car. Meanwhile, scrap building up for P18 between Nolde, Pendant, and Walsingham. Also, 10-second time penalty for the number 9 car. That, as Karppinen has finally decided to come into the pit, so we will keep an eye on where he is going to emerge. I'm just trying to find, that is De Campo that has got the 10-second time penalty for an unsafe rejoin. So they did deem that to be the case, and I did wonder if that was the way that steward's inquiry was going to go. And there's Karppinen, absolutely loving life at the front of the field. I think maybe those cars behind have managed to gain a little bit, but bearing in mind that Karppinen's tyres are almost 15 minutes newer than Huben's, for example. Huben came in as late as he possibly could. Sorry, as early as he possibly could. As of the number 30 car, that is Michael Frey again, who has had an incident in the middle of the mountain. He is going to, I think, get underway, although this is the trickiness of trying to find a way to get that car spun around. And he hasn't quite ended up in the same spot that he did before. I think he should be out of the way by the time our leaders come around to there, and he has got going again. So good spirit there from the Swiss driver to keep on going, but unfortunate stuff as the mountain does take another victim. Pendon applying the pressure to the back of Walsingham, but still can't quite make a move stick just yet. We'll keep an eye on how this fight plays out. Looking back at the penalties, though, 15-second time penalty as well for the number 13 car for an unsafe rejoin and causing a collision. And the number 13 did belong to... Who was that? I can't see them in my overlay, so I'm assuming that may have been someone that has retired from the race, and we will get that information perhaps a bit later on. A drive-through penalty for the number 29 car, and that was Ferris. And that was for causing a collision. So he really has been rather bad, unfortunately, on the circuit, by the looks of it, for him to get such a severe penalty. You don't see too many of those. So unfortunate there for the number 29 car. And the number 4 car has got a 5-second penalty, and that's a decision we were waiting on. So Hutchinson, he may have the position on track, but when that penalty is applied, unless he can find 5 seconds between himself and Huben, then he will drop into the midst of this pack and potentially actually to the back of this train of cars. It depends how much they start to battle. Marco Bischoff applying the pressure to the back of Steinbrenner now on the run up towards Hell's Corner, and defending the inside line is the BMW. He manages to keep that 992 Porsche behind for the time being. We'll go on board the rear diffuser. You see, based on the overlay on the left-hand side, these battles are starting to kick off again. So it wasn't much of a break. That is the full penalty update, though, for the time being. I will also try to have a bit of a look in a chat at some point, because I can see that you've all been rather busy and active in the chat as well. I will try my best to get a moment to address some of that as well. Unfortunately, I have all of this on a single monitor, so it does always become a little bit tricky to juggle some of these things. Jan Joog applying the pressure to Manuel Fuchs, but I don't think he's going to quite be able to do anything for the time being. Also, gap update out the front of the field. Karppinen versus Hutchinson. 4.5 seconds now the gap. Of course, we may see that close and change a bit, and then maybe extend as Karppinen's tyres come up to temperature. But Hutchinson, whilst he has obviously caused a little bit of contact with Valentine in that fight for P2, he's extended his gap over Huben by half a second as well, so he is wasting no time at all. And 25 minutes left in this race. Correcas looking for a move to try to go around the outside of Valentine, who exchanges one car applying the pressure for another. And that Porsche, whilst you would not have had to have really worried about it, even if it was pushing you along down towards the chase, 1.9 and the 992 generation of that car definitely can shift its weight and get a decent amount of top end. So Valentine having to defend, as is Carleter in the number 18 Porsche. Number 17 of Vassner trying to go around the outside, goes for the cutback on the exit. Won't be able to do anything just yet on this occasion, so maybe we'll have to look for an opportunity elsewhere as they climb the hill once more. Walsingham as well, actually applying some pressure to Matteo Noldi, as Walsingham did get that penalty. It's had quite a busy race, as Valentina Correcas going side by side, where it all went wrong for the Frenchman not too long ago. So maybe a bit of a poor exit from the Lamborghini, and right now he has got Korekkas glued to his gearbox, and Steinbrenner is getting involved in this one as well. And the BMW we know is quick in a straight line, so out of nowhere, the LFM car, the M4, filling the rear view mirror of Korekkas. He is bringing Marco Bischoff for company as well, so this is suddenly all kicked off once more. These drivers been very much battling hard over the last 40 minutes really, but has kind of ebbed and flowed. But this is another one of those moments where it is all closed up, and maybe a little bit of damage on board Valentin's Lamborghini at the front of this train is just meaning he's lacking a bit of pace at the moment, because now Hutchinson has 1.7 seconds over Huben, who's 2.5 seconds clear of Valentin. So that is 4.2 seconds now is the gap between Hutchinson and Barris. So right now, if he can continue to extend his advantage, Hutchinson would likely only end up dropping maybe one position and still manage to claim a podium, as Walsingham seems to have made up a move at a rather unusual part of the circuit, because you don't see too many moves being made over top of the mountain. So what happened here? Is it going to be a moment for the Aston Martin of Naldi as they head in towards Skyline? Oh dear! It all got very wonky there. Was there contact on the entry? Because Walsingham definitely, you could see in the body language of the car, carried way too much speed into the dipper, and he actually locked the front. He was trying to hit the brake pedal that hard, and that's with ABS. So I think Walsingham maybe got a bit too greedy there. And I think it's either there was contact or maybe it was evasive action from the Aston Martin. If it was, Nordy will definitely be arguing that perhaps there should be something looked at by the stewards, as the pit window does close after being open for 20 minutes. And meanwhile, now we have Valentin still feeling the pressure from Korekkas, and then Steinbrenner has dropped back just a little bit with Bischoff applying the pressure from behind. So we'll stay on board having a look at these drivers, and I shall try to have a bit of a quick gander at the chat and see what has been going in this. So I imagine some of these are probably a little bit out of time. So I think Valentin early on in the race, yep, I think he was just struggling in terms of pace. Obviously, as has now lost even a bit more pace with the extra damage that he sustained on his car. But you can see Hutchinson, whilst maybe not a completely fair representation, once he was unleashed, he is flying, and he is actually faster right now than your race leader Karppinen. So very well could find himself extending that advantage enough to hold on to P2 if he can find an extra 3 seconds. But Huben still doing a good job in the Mercedes and lapping in the 2 minutes times, as that was a good exit for Korekkas. Does he think about move towards the inside? You can see Valentin hovering, and he tries to open it up at the end. Oh, that got close. I'll tell you what, Steinbrenner, he's having a look-see as well. Marco Bischoff on the gearbox of the BMW. It is absolutely battles left, right and centre. Valentin out of nowhere has managed to gain just a little bit of breathing room over those behind. But it looks like it will just about all stay as it was, as they head up towards turn 2 once more. And blasting on by quicker than the cameraman can keep up with it. But I'm sure that these 4 will close up again quickly, because it does look like Valentin has overall struggled for a little bit of pace. Yeah, unfortunate incident earlier on between, I think it was Schaefer and, was it De Campo? De Campo, I think, was sent around at the cutting and then had some questionable, unfortunately, negotiating of rejoining the track. He's not the only one today. It's an easy mistake to make. It's a very tricky circuit, and unfortunately, sometimes you can just make a little bit of a wrong call, and the consequences can be very dire around the mountain. So unfortunate stuff there. And yes, definitely out of the field that we have had this evening. There's been a lot of wheel banging between various cars, and I'm not sure there's actually many of them running in exactly the same condition that they were at the beginning of this race. I think a bit of paint scrapes off the majority of these cars. Timu has maintained brilliant pace throughout, and Hutchinson maybe wanted that later pit stop. I'll tell you what, 3.7 seconds the gap now between Hutchinson and Karppinen. So as soon as the Canadian has been unleashed, He is absolutely flying at the moment and is really starting to mount a challenge, potentially, for race victory. But of course, he has that 5-second penalty. And whether or not, would have been able to do anything if he hadn't have managed to get out of that battle, as there was a white flag out for Matteo Noldi. I see a little bit of paint scraped on the front of that car as well. So we'll go for a replay. You can see, I think he has had an incident here on the run into Skyline. And as he gets in towards the dipper, what's going to happen here? And, oh dear, there it is. It happened very late on and just completely misjudges the apex. I was wondering where it all went wrong because I knew the two cars are swapped position. We were running out of time. On the replay, absolutely crash bang wallops that inside apex and the concrete, sending him out very sideways. Big damage on the front of that car. Nico Pendon, who's not, I think, completely clean on his car either, but has maybe got one that's in a bit better condition, says thank you very much, and goes up into P17. Meanwhile, battle for P4 has closed up once more. And as an update, Hutchinson now is 5 seconds clear of these drivers as Bischoff brings out the white flag for a moment. Was there an incident there from the German driver? And that's what it was. It was a big bit of oversteer on board the number 2 car there, manages to just about keep it pointing in the right direction. I wonder if that's the mistake that he's been making that has been constantly dropping him back, because he did lose about the same sort of amount of time on this lap, as we saw him occasionally dropping back early in the race. Gap between Hutchinson and Karppinen back up to 4 seconds, but like I say, crucially, the gap between Hutchinson and Barrier over 5 seconds now. So Hutchinson, as it stands, would finish P3. He just needs another 2.3 seconds if he wants to stay ahead of Huben in that Unicorns of Love Mercedes. It is your championship leader, and his main rival right now is the man we are looking at, the number 1 driver in the server and on the platform. I think the only driver as well to have an elo of over 7,000, which is a mighty, mighty effort. And there's the yellow flag for Noldi, who has been having a very sad time in that middle sector, and I think, unfortunately, it has continued to go wrong in exactly the same place as it has on the previous laps. How does it go this time around on the entry in towards the dipper? It's okay so far. Oh, it's not going to be the same mistake again, is it, from Matteo? Ah, it is. And it's an almost exact repeat, other than the fact that he almost destroyed a BMW in the process. Drexler had to have very, very quick reaction times to avoid the Aston Martin there, but unfortunately for the number 25 of Noldi, his day goes from bad to worse and finds himself in recovery mode. Most definitely now. Carl Nater trying to make a move up on the Mercedes of Sasha Vassner, looking to the outside, but surely that's not going to work, and the Mercedes has got enough of an advantage to cover that line on the entry to that corner. As Noldi has come into the pits, I think there may just be a bit too much damage on that car overall now. 13.5 minutes left on the clock for this race, which has been action-packed from start to finish, and we still have some very important scraps to take care of. Hutchinson again, half a second in clear of Carpenter's time last time around. And whilst I think realistically, can he take the race win? It's unlikely, but could he potentially take P2 and extend 5 seconds over Huben? Not out of the question, because he was half a second clear on the last lap, and we've definitely got more than 4 laps to go. So if he maintains that differential, could certainly be in the mix for taking P2. And whilst it was never particularly nice if you exactly profit from an incident, and Hutchinson has been renowned for being fantastic in his racecraft capabilities, so I'm sure absolutely no malice whatsoever in that incident, with Valentine just trying to find any opportunity that he could, and combine it with a circuit like this, and just unfortunately a little bit of contact saw the Frenchman go offline and drop a couple of positions in the process. Nater, for the Spaghetti Racing car, has gained 6 positions and is trying to make it 7 as he continues to scrap away with Vassner. Matteo Noldi just coming out of the pit, as also Bejic is continuing to try to recover some ground. A car that we know was very quick in qualifying And we'll have to see Lamborghini versus the 296. In actual fact, also Stapleford versus Lowen van der Nijnder. Both cars got upset by the curve, the bump there in the middle of the chase. As I think that's Bukowski that's a lap down that is joining them. And Beatty is going to get the move done now around the outside in towards turn 21. Meanwhile, Stapleford trying to go around the outside himself. And Bukowski, say he's a lap down. And he's just trying to mostly stay out of this fight, but equally trying to see if he can unlap himself. Not sure he can really do anything to change his points haul from today, unfortunately. And the Aston Martin of Stapleford on this occasion still having to hang back behind Van der Nijnder. I'll tell you what, though, Grantis Carreras has suddenly dropped away from the Lamborghini, and I'll tell you what, this BMW, that's the wrong view, this BMW is no slouch in a straight line, and without the tow, the number one car of Carreras could seriously be vulnerable, and it's going to be side-by-side action once again. Towards the chase they go, and almost contact in the middle of the corner there. Carreras, he's brave on the brakes, he's fighting this tooth and nail, because he doesn't want to lose any more points to the Mercedes of Huben, who is further up right now, currently sitting in P3. Steinbrenner's having none of it, though. He wants this top 5 position. Trying to go around the outside now. Punch the microphone in excitement in this battle of the M4 around the outside. Incredible move from the German driver and maybe the number one man in the server. But I tell you what, Steinbrenner has just pulled off an absolutely top move there, and I feel the need to go back on the replay of this one. Let's go on board with Steinbrenner. He went around the outside at 21, turned into the inside of 22, in towards Murray's corner. I thought the Porsche was going to have the advantage on the inside line, but absolutely no room given from Steinbrenner. Just a little bit of a touch in the middle of the corner, but I think realistically all kind of fair game through it. It's a very tight corner, trying to go side by side through, and the pair of them did a very good job in that one, and makes a stellar overtake up into P5 then, swapping a position now between Van der Nijnder and Stapleford, who goes all the way around the outside on the exit 21. He's going to have a 29604 company. Mikowski is still just watching it and is a spectator in this, trying to roll off the brakes. Is the Belgian driver, but I don't think he can get it done in the end. We'll try to see with a replay what took place there. The Aston Martin had the run towards the chase, has that line. Neither car succumbing to that bump quite as much this time around the outside. It was completely clean. Very nicely done from the number 20 car to pull that move off. Dipped a little bit of a wheel onto the grass, but certainly no contact there in that one. So nicely negotiated for Robbie Stapleford, who now makes his way further into the top 20 and sits in P19. Carreras immediately back on the case of the number 14 car. He wants that P5 spot immediately, but I don't think he's going to get it this time around. The problem he's got now is he may have the slipstream. The Porsche may be quicker than it was, but the M4 definitely a bit of a powerhouse in straight line speed as of late. Looks towards the inside, showing his nose, trying to apply the pressure to Steinbrenner. Meanwhile, Carlota has been trying to make the overtake over Sasha Vasta for a number of laps now, and he has the inside line of the chase. Manuel Fuchs is a spectator in all of this time. We'll go on board with the German driver, who maybe is going to look for the exit out of 22 because Neter can't get the job done, and he has lost momentum now as they head up in towards the final corner, and the 24 car just about alongside, barely given a hair's width between himself and Neter on the exit, and bounces over the grass there. Can't get the job done. Some of them might be able to, though, as Carreras absolutely glued to the rear diffuser of the M4, but he can't make it stick. Also, tell you what, Hutchinson may have made a crucial error on the last lap, lost 0.6 of a second, and the gap has extended now between Karpinen and the Canadian driver up to 4.5 seconds. So Karpinen looking more and more in the clear, and Hutchinson's chances of maybe holding on to P2 starting to maybe dwindle a little bit as we get into the closing stages of this race with 7.5 minutes left to go. Oh, this was a bit of a moment for Steinbrenner then. I think he managed to just about gather it up. That got very close, though, with some of the concrete. Also just trying to catch up a little bit on more of the chat. And yes, Lamborghini does tend to have, it's not the best in terms of acceleration. I think it's a little bit like the Aston Martin. Manuel Fuchs seems to have maybe had a little bit of a moment. Is this the same sort of issue we saw for Bischoff? Oh dear. Number 24 car. Very peculiar. It was already in a very awkward place. And oh dear! That's got even worse. Okay, well, we need to do some reviewing as that's contact. I think that was Walsingham. You could hear the engine only just came back on. Oh my goodness, this is not what you want. And the two BMWs clatter the Porsche as well. Race leaders nowhere near this, thankfully. But Manuel Fuchs, who seemed to have a peculiar issue, has gone around. Steinbrenner still fighting off Korekas. Can we catch what happened there to Manuel Fuchs? Because it all kicked off. Unfortunately, just rejoined in the same place. Is that Schaefer? That's not. No, Schaefer has actually retired to the pits. I'm not quite sure who that was. That was Polyakov that got collected there in all of that. And then we had the likes of the two BMWs making their way through. That was Pennon and Drexler who got caught up as well. And then Manuel Fuchs, who eventually did manage to get going again. But that is unfortunately exactly what can happen when you are on this very, very tricky scenario. I got so confused and so observant on that. I completely forgot to go to replay graphic. Do apologise, everybody. But meanwhile, 5.5 minutes left to go. And I was just trying to explain a point about the Lamborghini versus a Porsche as Manuel Fuchs has come into the pits. Maybe not entirely surprising. A lot of damage now on board the Porsche. The Porsche has always been the king of low-end acceleration. That has been something that the naturally aspirated flat six has been stellar at, and the Lamborghini, it may have good top end, but I think it's potentially, it's just, you know, it doesn't quite have the same sort of power band as the flat six. It doesn't quite deliver the same level of torque. It is a naturally aspirated car, but it just doesn't quite deliver that same oomph at the low end. So the Lamborghini being sluggish out of chicane doesn't surprise me too much, but certainly is a characteristic that these drivers have been having to contend with, especially the likes of Valentine, has been under pressure for a long, long time from the likes of these Porsches. Correct as close as he has been in a while, setting one out the inside, trying to reclaim the position. Steinbrenner, though, fighting it on the outside, almost mirror image of what it was last time around. And Steinbrenner, can he get it to the inside? He can, just about. He has to go defensive in towards Murray's corner, as Korekas now on the outside, tries to cut back towards the inside line, but he can't do it, and Steinbrenner putting up a very good fight. I think for the first time in this race, Vantine's been able to get a bit of a sigh of relief in his position. It may only be P4. He might be wanting more from this one, having started on the front row, but after the tribulations he seems to have faced in terms of, you know, tyre wear and general race pace, he may not be too disappointed about that in the end, though he won't be close enough to inherit from the penalty that Hutchinson is going to get for the very instant that saw him drop down. Meanwhile, as it's side by side between Pennon and Drexler now towards 21, it's the Finnish driver that comes out on top in that. Drexler squeezed towards the outside of the circuit then, and in the end has to drop back by just over a second to stay in P17 for the moment. As what about Bajic versus Van der Nijnde? Barely anything to choose between them. Oh, and I thought there was going to be contact on the exit. He saw he had the momentum, but I think had to back out of the throttle. A Ferrari in the hands of the Belgian driver, just not quite getting the exit he would have wanted. Yellow flag out for Frey, who's gone off again. And Michael Frey continuing to be, unfortunately, a little bit of just a general hazard over the last few laps, and he has managed to get going again by the looks of it. I don't know if I'll be able to catch everything that's taken place, because we've also had a swapping of position between Walsingham and Polyakov, that was. We'll try to see if we can catch. That's what happened to Michael Frey. He's made contact with the wall and then lost it very, very heavily. And then Walsingham versus Polyakov, and Polyakov just went very deep in towards the braking zone then, and unfortunately opens up the gap, goes wide in slightly into the marbles. Nothing too catastrophic, but Walsingham, as he continues his recovery, manages to sneak on through and goes up into P14. 2.5 minutes left to go then. Whereabouts is Karppinen, who has managed to extend his advances? So there will be 2 more laps to go, including this one. And what a stellar drive it's been from the Finnish driver, Netter, the closest he has been in a while, going through side by side on the through the chase now, and he's gone to the outside line, but he can't get the move done there, and still he looks at the back of the Mercedes. And to answer the question, I will absolutely interview Teemu. If he wants to hop into the interview room, I will more than happily interview that man, because he has had a stellar job today, and it's always lovely to hear from the drivers after the race. We don't get too many. They are rather shy from time to time, but if anyone that knows the drivers in the Pro Series tonight wants to give them perhaps a little bit of a nudge to have a talking to us in the closing stages of this stream, it would be lovely to hear from them. Nater applying the pressure once again to Vassner. White flag out for Lohan van den Einde. I'm not too sure if that is a big ip or not for 296. It's difficult to tell. Usually at Bathurst is nothing good. And in actual fact, maybe it was a slow-moving car to allow Makoski by, who has been looking, he's a lap down, has been looking at the back of that Ferrari for some time. Karppinen coming into the chase for the penultimate time. Then he will have one more lap after this. But what a drive it's been from this man. Thank you to Kylo there in the chat. Korekas hasn't given up on this P5 spot either. Let's go on board the rear diffuser of Steinbrenner, closing that gap in the 992 Porsche. Just hasn't got quite the top end that Lithuanian would want at this stage, and he's not close enough to get side by side this time, although it's a bit of a clunky exit for the M4 as the final lap has started. Yellow flag for Polnikov. That's not likely to be good, and I can see he has come to a stop in the middle of the mountain there. So what has happened to the Porsche? He was overtaken by Walsingham not too long ago for a moment in towards turn 2. There's also a battle heating up between two Yas Heat drivers of Jardier and Inostroza for P8. So we've got a few battles to keep an eye on in the closing stages. Coming into Skyline now, and as he breaks down into there, takes some grass, clobbers the concrete. Oh, and that's a heavy impact there as well. You can see that was Manuel Fuchs that was coming through there, but thankfully managed to stay out of trouble. As Karppinen going through this sector for the last time. He hasn't got many cars up ahead, so he should be safe from any danger from anyone else. Polnikov has got going again. I don't think he's lost a position as a result. Actually, oh dear. And the yellow flag has just suddenly come out there. I don't know if it's suddenly got worse for the number 19 car. It's difficult to tell, but one way or another, he has come to a complete stop now. Will he get going again? He looks like he has decided to. So, good spirit there shown from the number 19 car. Whereabouts, so, is your race leader? He hasn't got long to go. Just a handful of corners left. Korekas has dropped away as a Drexler versus Pendon on the run up towards turn 2. This could be a last lap move for the number 22 car. Around the outside he goes. He manages to get the overlapping knees and confidence under braking. I think Pendon running a bit wounded as well, and does take the move. But Hutchinson, he wasn't able to close in on this man. He took pole position in fine fashion. He was in command of this race from start to finish. And Teemu Karppinen for Grip Hacks Engineering is a race winner in the Case King Pro Series. An absolutely stellar job from that man. Hutchinson finishes P2 on track, but will drop to P3 as Huben stays within touching distance and manages to get another good points finish to his name. Korekas wasn't able to fight back on Steinbrenner in the end, and Steinbrenner takes a fantastic P5 as Jardier versus Inostroza. It all kicks off on the final lap. No love lost between those two on the exit of the final turn, and it goes the way of the man from Chile to finish in P8. But we're not done just yet. We've got things still kicking off. Polnikov wounded, trying to run around. Oh dear, that's Michael Frey again, who's just got a little bit of a jump scare in the middle of the dipper. But Pendon trying to apply the pressure to Drexler. Can he make a move down the inside? I think he might be too far away. Drexler may have done just about enough to take P15 in the end of this race. Still applying the pressure, though. We saw side-by-side action between the two Porsches a moment ago from the Yassit guys. Is it going to be the same between these two? It's almost a mirror image, but it will go the way of Drexler ahead of Pendon. What about, though, for Rats versus Van den Einde? It's all kicked off. Bukowski's off on the grass on the exit of 22. There, oh, a big moment on the exit. What's going on the last lap of this race at Rats versus Van den Einde? The Belgian driver sent towards the outside. Contact again on the entry. Van den Einde trying to go for the exit, but I don't think he's going to be able to get the move done. And a little bit of wiggly frustration, perhaps, from both of those cars. A very stylish way to whip around and greet the Belgian driver across the line. Last couple of cars making their way to the line now. And what a race we have bear witness to. I think Steckenberger will be the last of those drivers to cross the line. Is there, in fact, one more? Who else is missing? Who else is... Oh, the number 25 car. Who is that? That is Matteo Naldi, who has had a very busy day and kicking up the dirt as well to go with that. But my goodness, what's action? It's always the way. The Pro Series always delivers on action start to finish and some of the best racing that you can find in ACC. And then you put that together with Bathurst race circuits and you have a deadly, deadly combination for some fantastic, fantastic stuff. Just trying to catch up a little bit as Naldi makes his way to the end. The number 4 car, so that was Hutchinson. He got his 5-second penalty. Number 24 got a 10-second penalty for an unsafe rejoin. That goes to somebody that has left... Oh, no, that's Matt Mulfuchs that gets that penalty. And then everything else was no further action from the stewards, who had their work cut out, I think, in that one. But a stellar job from then. I can see Carpenter waiting in the interview room, so we will get him in in just a moment. It'd be wonderful to talk to him. So let's do that in just a moment. Just have to make sure that he will be audible over into here. So let's see if we can bring in your race winner from today, Teemu Karppinen, in an absolutely stellar fashion, taking victory and joining us for an interview as well. Teemu, you must be absolutely delighted with that performance today.
This felt so good.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I was making reference to your performance in last season where you were in the M4 and you showed good pace around here. You were really jousting around the top. You made some daring moves through the chase as well. A little bit of a different perspective from your side today. An amazing pole position, and then just cleared away in the early laps. Let everyone else battle behind, took care of your tyres, went for the overcar as well. And whilst I don't imagine that an hour's worth of driving at top speed at Bathurst is a relaxing experience, perhaps a favourable position to find yourself in.
Yeah, definitely. I think I owe Valentin Barrier a beer at some point, because the train that he formed into the first stint really helped me. In the second stint, it was kind of clear that Hutchinson kind of had pretty much equal pace. So yeah, I was lucky that I got a good run for the first corner and then could just build a gap and then manage the rest of the race.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And were you expecting the Lamborghini to be on this sort of level of pace? I mean, I know we're all sort of finding our feet a little bit still with with 1.9. We had another hot fix today where apparently there was some subtle BOP changes. So did you go into this event thinking that you'd have the pace to compete for the win, or did it come as a pleasant surprise when you found yourself doing 59s in quali?
I mean, yeah, I kind of knew like a couple of hours before the quali that, hey, we're gonna have good pace now in the car. Yeah, I would be lying if I didn't recognize that the pop was on my side today, but that's just how it is sometimes. Exactly. Now I got to feel how the Honda drivers felt like last season. So.
Exactly. We were talking about earlier on in the stream. There's always naturally going to be this kind of it ebbs and flows in the BOP. You're going to have a day where the Porsche is the strongest. A day, Spa last week, the Ferrari was just on another planet, and we've seen it time and time again. But but without a doubt, Bathurst is a circuit where you can have the fastest car, but you have to be absolutely pixel perfect with your lines and consistent to still end up benefiting from that. And it's exactly what you ended up doing today. So incredible stuff from you. A very, very well-deserved pole position and race win. And, heading over into COTA for next week. We have 90 minutes at COTA. Any ideas how you're feeling for that one? Do you think that one may be a bit more of a struggle? Do you think you can carry this momentum forward and put in a bid at the front of the field again for that race?
I mean, hopefully. I've actually got no clue what to expect from that in terms of car balancing, but I've always kind of liked COTA. As far as I understood, we're gonna have also some mixed conditions and a 90-minute race, so it's gonna be super interesting to see how it's gonna turn out.
Yeah, I think the tyre wear, the longer the race, the more pivotal tyre management and everything plays into it, and especially with what we're kind of finding at 1.9, that is a massive element in terms of your race pace. So yeah, very very interesting one indeed. And again, congratulations for an amazing drive from you, Stay, and also thank you for joining us for an interview as well. It's a rare occurrence. We don't have too many drivers that hop in, so it's always lovely to hear from our drivers. And amazing stuff from you, Stay, and best of luck going into next week as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers, Timo. So amazing stuff from your race winner, Timo Karppinen. And to have a little bit of a look through the rest of the results then of exactly what we have ended up being witness to today. You can see Timo Karppinen winning there ahead of Huben, who after Hutchinson penalty takes the final podium position, followed by Barrett and Steinbrenner. Amazing stuff from him to finish in the top 5. Korekas, Bischoff, Inestroza, Jardier and Soldatov rounding out your top 10. And potentially we'll just have a little bit of a gander at the stewards' inquiries. Doesn't look like... let's have a bit of a look here. Number 16 car, 15-second penalty for causing a collision. And that was Bukowski, who I wonder, did that have something to do with the mysterious yellow flag at the end of the race there? Didn't quite, unfortunately, manage to catch what happened there. We had contact with quite a few drivers, and so there's only so much we could keep up with at once. But it does look like, unfortunately, Christos Day got a little bit worse in the closing stages. Vassner, Nita, Yog, Walsingham and Drexler round out your top 15, with Drexler gaining 11 positions. Phenomenal drive from the number 22 car. Great stuff from him in the BMW. May well have been the biggest mover on the grid, in actual fact, joint with Samuel Ratz. As Pendon, Stapleford, Bajic, Polyakov, Ratz around out top 20 with Van den Einde, De Campo, Ferris, Fuchs, Frey, McCoskey, Naldi, Schneckenberger, Lateo and Fock going down to the end of the top 30, although Lateo, Fock and Schaefer your DNFs in the end. And what a busy race it was for some of those drivers. Some making mistakes, and then some unfortunately just getting caught up in incidents with other drivers being victim to this very, very tricky circuit. And it did exactly what I anticipated it to do. It doesn't look like we're going to have any more interviews today, but it was nice to have our race winner and commanding pole sitter at that as well in the comms box. So thank you, I think, also to Kylo for doing a little bit of background work on making that happen. So it's always great to hear from our drivers. But it looks like that will be it for today. So we'll be back again next week for the Circuit of the Americas, where we get to the halfway point in the championship, where it'll be a 90-minute race around there, and a circuit that traditionally has been very good for cars like the Porsche. I imagine is going to be very strong there as well. So will that be the opportunity for Korekas to try to bounce back a little bit after what he will consider, he sets high standards for himself, despite being a young head on those shoulders, that, today was a bit of a disappointment. In the same way that he kicked himself, I imagine, for the drive-through at Suzuka, he would have wanted to get a bit more from today when it was right there for so long during this race. But maybe at COTA he'll be able to bounce back, and after having gone winless in multiple seasons of the Pro Series, maybe he can make it 3 in 6 races at COTA. We'll have to wait and see. But I imagine the likes of Jardier, Inestroza, Bischoff, any other K. Kramer Racing esports drivers that join us as well will all be very much hot on this hill, so it won't be made easy for him. But do look to join us for that. And if you have enjoyed what you have been seeing this evening, then do consider subscribing to the channel. Like I say, we are closing in on 2,500 subs, and it would be amazing to hit such a wonderful milestone. And if you have liked what you have seen then, and you fancy maybe getting behind the wheel yourself rather than sitting back and watching these guys do it, then do head over to lowfuelmotorsport.com. Get yourself signed up and get yourself a license. You can work your way through the ranks and up to the dizzying heights of some of the drivers you have seen on screen this evening, where you can compete in the Pro Series and other championships for some amazing prizes as we continue to grow this platform more and more. I think also in the space of the last week, we crossed over an incredible milestone of 90,000 users, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, almost 90,500 now on the LFM platform, which is just crazy, crazy numbers. So thank you each and every single one of you who have joined in the stream, as well as those who have just been enjoying the LFM platform in general. But yes, do have a look at that. And if maybe GT3 on ACC isn't quite your thing, then also R Factor 2 is on the LFM platform as well. You can get stuck in with open wheelers, prototypes, touring cars if you want even more door-banging action between cars that we saw tonight. That you can look to get involved in some of that as well. Also some Nordislife action if you really want one of the biggest driving challenges known to man. So lots and lots to enjoy. But that will be it then for this evening, so join us same time, same place next week for more of the Pro Series. And also this weekend, if you have some time on your hands, the Virtual Endurance Masters is heading to the Nürburgring for 8 hours, which will be at 12 p.m. midday, starting 12 p.m. midday UK time on Saturday, so 1 p.m. Central European time. So do also look out for that, where we will be live on Twitch with the English stream at twitch.tv/Virtual Endurance Masters, the German stream at twitch.tv/Low Fuel Motorsport, and then for the Spanish stream, twitch.tv/Top Racing TV. So do also tune in for that for more action, but a bit more on the endurance side. But with all that said and done then, thank you everybody so much for watching and joining us this evening. Look forward to seeing you all next week at the Circuit of the Americas. But for tonight then, it's goodbye.